Mac, I'm putting together another cider press day, October 28th, 2017, and I'm just going to take you along and show you the equipment I'm using and my process so you can see how I'm doing all this and maybe learn a thing or two or comment and tell me how I can improve it. So I'll go through some of the equipment I'm using. First thing here is a Waste King, I think it's a 8000 garbage disposal, and so this is a little 1 horsepower garbage disposal unit that I got off Amazon. It's been working great. I already did 11 gallons of cider, about 120 pounds of apples 2 weeks ago, and it worked perfectly, so I'm really happy with it. I just built it into this little frame here. As you can see, it's just some little block wood that I bought, just pine wood, and some plywood here for the top. And what I've been doing is I bought this funnel. It's just an aluminum funnel on Amazon. Cut it down to fit a little bit so that it fits right into the top here, and so I just put the funnel into the top, and you'll see this process that as I'm grinding, and I can use the funnel as a kind of hopper, throw apples in, and then what I'm doing is using this piece of almond wood. I just grabbed out of the wood pile, put this dowel through it, just press fit it through. And it's specifically sized so that I can use it as a tamper to tamp down the apples into the garbage disposal, apply some force to them if they're not feeding automatically. And so I just use that to kind of push them through the hopper, and it's been working really well. Then I've also got this vinyl tubing, picked it up at the hardware store, and I just slip this over the port there, the drop port, and it allows me to direct the apple pulp that comes out into a bucket or whatever I put below it. It makes it a little easier to control, a little less splatter. And I just put a little zip tie around here to hold it on, and that worked great last week too. I've got this foot pedal that works quite well, and this allows me, it's plugged in obviously to the grinder, and it allows me to operate the grinder just with my foot, and that gives me hands-free use, so I can reach in, grab apples, use the tamper to tamp them in, and turn it on and off with this. It also helps me easily turn the grinder off whenever I'm not directly using it, which saves a lot of heat buildup. The one downside I've heard of these setups is that they can overheat. I didn't have any trouble with that last time. I did, short, less than 5-minute runs grinding each bucket and didn't overheat. So I'm hopeful that this little foot switch and just running it not too long and not too hard will keep working for me. Here's how I set up the garbage disposal grinder. I actually just used some bench clips to clip it onto a stool here, and then I use this little bucket. I can put that right underneath the downspout, and just dumps the apple pulp right into this guy. And a key thing that I'm really happy with is I actually just bought this at the dollar store, but it's worked perfectly because when this bucket is full, it's the perfect amount for one layer of my press trays, one layer of the racking cloth. So I just fill this thing up, pour it into my form, wrap it up, and then I'm on to the next layer. So I'm not scooping apple pulp out of anything, transferring it over. It's as simple as filling up this bucket, walking over to the press, pouring it in, and then bringing this bucket back over and filling it up again. And if we step outside here, this little green bucket that I use to wash my apples is actually, it's the same size as this bucket. And so what that allows me to do is one basket of apples, I'll wash it, grind it, fill up this bucket, and set it up into the press all in one go, and then I can just kind of run cycles of that, and it works out really easily. I'm really happy with it. The rest that I'm using, it's from Harbor Freight, and you can still get these on sale for less than $100. I highly recommend it. I don't think I could have built a wood structure, even with pine boards, for less than $100, especially once you factor the 12-ton jack into it. So I really recommend this. I've seen, and I based this whole design actually on a couple guys on YouTube. Alan Yerlington, I think is his name, and S. Rogue. They're both using 20-ton Harbor Freight presses with pretty similar setups. And all I've done is scaled it down for, I'm just doing a couple gallons a year at home, and so I certainly don't need the 20-ton press, but this 12-ton press works just fine for a home scale process. And so the key to these, and this is what some of these other guys on YouTube have done, and I did the same thing, just copied their idea, and it works great. I just took this super strut that you can get at a good hardware store. This is the same stuff they hang appliances, lights, electronics on in like warehouses and things like that. And I just screwed it into the bottom of this plywood, piece of 3/4 inch plywood. And that makes my base plate, it's strong enough, it works great. So you can see I just put some little lines here just to help me get it lined up when I'm putting it in the press. Another key modification is just a couple 2x4s here that I screwed together, and what they're doing is they're providing some support to this cross beam here. The way this press is designed is actually got a little pin in there, and with any sort of hydraulic press you're supposed to apply the force through the pin, but with this setup I'm trying to apply force across the entire width of the beam so I can get as much force over as wide of an area as possible to press my apples. So I just screwed these two pieces of plywood together. You can see that's where the pin is in the bottom. It doesn't stick out, it's just flush. And this allows me to apply the force across the entire beam, and it works fine. I just tied it on with some paracord so it's not flopping around or falling down in between the presses, and it works fine. And then for my tray, I'm using this tray. I think it's a 21 by 17 or something like that, just a lunch tray from Amazon. I got it so food safe, and as you can see I cut the corners out and it actually fits perfectly in here. And so by cutting out the corners, what I was able to do was get it locked in here so it won't move around, it doesn't slide, it won't tilt or tip off or anything like that. It works perfectly, and just rests on top of my press platform. And then I used silicone, food safe silicone glue to glue in that little garbage disposal port, exit port, and that is where my juice flows out. So you can see here I drilled a hole in the top of the tray, and so the juice flows into this tray and out through the hole, and I can put a bucket or whatever I want to catch the juice right under there, and it works fine. For press cloths, these are what I'm using. They're actually 90% shade fabric, shade curtain, and they are working just fantastically. I'm really happy with them. They're polyethylene, I believe, so they don't absorb any of the juice, any water. Really easy to clean, easy to sanitize. And I just bought a roll, I think about 18-foot roll, cut them into 1 square meter sections, and then burned the edges so that they wouldn't fray and unravel after I cut them, and they've been working great. So here's my collection tray. I've got the press base installed. I use this, I think it's like a 4-gallon stainless steel colander or pot to collect the juice. It's easy to sanitize. It goes through this screen just to filter out any bits of pulp or anything that slips through the cloths. And then this is my form for my rack and cloth stack, and it's just a steel baking tray that I cut the bottom out of. Got at Walmart for a couple bucks, and it works quite well. So I just put this down. I'll put one of my press cloths on top of it, and then fill it up with the cider pulp after it's ground up. Fold the cloth over, pull this thing out, and then put a rack in between. Put this thing on top of the rack, do another one and another one all the way up to the top, and I'll show you that process once I get into it. The apples I'll be juicing today. I've got 3 or 2.5 of these baskets. They're just laundry baskets, again from the dollar store or Walmart. They work quite well, I found, for storing apples. And then so 2 full baskets about, and then a half basket of these beautiful little crab apples that I found last week. What I do with these apples, which is a pretty common technique for cider makers, is I'll put these apples into storage in the woodshed for a week after I pick them. And that, I've heard, and it might be bro science, but it allows them to soften up a little bit, and also maybe lose a little bit of their moisture content, which gives you a higher alcohol cider, more sugar in the solution, which is always good. And yeah, I found it works fine. So I'll pick them, put them in the woodshed for a week outdoors, let them soften or sweat, as they call it, and then grind them. I've also got this little bag of crab apples that I picked up, and these will be used along with this basket of crab apples to add some good tannic flavors and complexity. So what I do with these apples to get them all rinsed off and washed is I'll decant these big baskets into my little green basket there. It's got some holes drilled in the bottom and obviously large side holes. Now I wash these real quick, so I've offloaded about half this basket into this little green basket, bring it over to this big tub, and just give them a rinse with clean water, a couple of bounces in and out, and then just let them drain out back into the tub. And that just cleans off any road grime or dust, bird poop, things like that off the apples. Makes them ready to go in to the next stage, the grinder. Real quick, the grinder in action and how I use it. Keep in mind this is one-handed, so I'm going to do my best to do this with one hand. But basically, I can load the apples into my little hopper here. I'm going to try to look through the camera screen and give you guys a good view of this. Use the foot pedal, so I'll turn it on, get some apples in there, and I can actually, with pretty much all the apples I get here in Tahoe, load them straight in. I don't have to cut them up or halve them or quarter them or anything, which is really convenient. So I can just throw them right in, turn the grinder on, and then I just use my stick to encourage them through. You can see here, coming out of the pipe is the pulp, and that just goes right into my bucket. I'll throw a couple more apples in so you can see the whole process. But it moves quite quickly, and not too loud, as you can hear. And so that's how that goes. And I can go through one of these baskets in a couple minutes with both hands. So I just finished this basket. You can see here the apple pulp, fresh apple pulp. And what's just so awesome about this garbage disposal is the texture of the pulp is just absolutely perfect for pressing. It's just really kind of more of a pulverized than a cut. And I think that really helps to just smash up all the cells and get you really good yield. I'm really happy with the way this grinder worked out, and I just wanted to show you real quick this kind of pro tip here that I've figured out. So when you're done with a basket or a run, you'll see in here, I don't know if I've got enough light, but you know, there's a little bit of apple pulp left in the grinder that even if I run it, spins around there. You see it's not really ejecting all of it. So what you can do, I'm just using this Treetop 3 Apple Blend juice. Of course you can use your own juice if you're already midway through a press. I don't have any juice pressed yet, so I'm just using this store-bought, but you can pour it into the grinder. It'll wash out all the pulp that was in the system. You can see, just dump it in there, and then it'll just come out. So I find that works really well to clear everything out at the end of each cycle. And when you're ready to clean the press, when you're done pressing for the day, of course all you need to do to clean it is pour either hot water, cold water, doesn't really matter, into this guy, and run it for a minute with the water in it, and it'll just blast itself clean. It's really convenient, really easy to deal with. Alright, so this is how I'm loading the bags. You see I've got my bucket of the pulp that I just ground up, and it's really as simple as just pouring it right into my form, into the press cloth. One bucket, all done. And let me just rinse my hands real quick, make sure they're clean. You might be able to hear the juice running in the background. It's already just flowing freely. And just pack this pulp in the form. Make sure it's fairly even, pressed into the sides and everything. And then once it's packed in, I can just fold it over itself. Make sure it's tight. And that's my first layer. So now what I can do is come along with the form off and add on one of my racks. This is actually just a cut up bread tray, but I'm also using lunch trays, and they've worked really well. And so I just make sure my bag's tight and place this on top, and that gives me a flat platform to build the next layer on. Put my form back, and I'll put some cloth back on it, and we'll be on to the next layer. I like to set up the cloth in the diamond pattern. I've seen a lot of people do that, and I think it works pretty well. So, just get it in here, set it up. And the way I've cut these, they're a little too big for my press, but it's not too much of an inconvenience. So I've just left them like this. Saved me a lot of cutting and setup when I got them, because they're already in 2 meter sections. And so now I've got the next layer set up, and I'm ready to grind a new half bucket full of apples and pour it right in. It's about an hour later. Grinding's done, and I've got my rack and cloth set up, the rack and cheese all set up. So I've got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 layers here. This press can obviously accommodate a lot more, maybe twice as much. And to fill in the space, I'm using this 4x4 pine wood, just stacked across and then stacked vertically, just to take up that space and allow me to apply the pressure straight into the apples. And you can see the juice is flowing into my tray, just with the weight of the bags themselves and the whole press setup. This is my top press plate that I use. It's a thick cutting board, I think of like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch, looks like 3/4 inch HDPE cutting board, easy to sanitize. And so I put that down as the top plate, and then the wood blocks to spread the force out across it. So now really all I have to do is start cranking on the jack, apply the force. I'll get the full press. I expect to get at least 5 gallons of juice out of this run. I think I was using about 70 or 80 pounds of apples. You can see here I've already got about 1.5 gallons of juice just that just dripped out from the weight of the apple pulp. And so I'll fill up the rest of this carboy after this press. Be right back. Done with the press. You can see how far our stack has been squeezed out, and it's just, you know, tiny little bits of the bag are even visible now between my racks. I've got, looks like another 4 gallons, so I've got about 4 gallons here, so it looks like that 80 pounds of apples made about 8 gallons, which is awesome. I'm getting just insane yield out of this setup with the garbage disposal and this Harbor Freight press. The yield has just been exceptional. So I'm just going to have to figure out what to do with this extra juice. I'll probably just freeze it and use it to top up my carboys after I rack them into their secondary fermenters. But yeah, so that's the process, and I'll try to get a shot of this pulp once I release the press and start emptying out these bags, because it's pretty funny. It looks like cardboard or something. It's just completely dried out, just a thin little strip of apple pulp, and I just throw that back in my garden for it to naturally compost, and then you get the added benefit of little apple tree saplings, which you can grow into future cider apples. So I'm just cleaning up, but I wanted to show you what I'm left with. This apple pulp is just insane. I pull this bag apart. This is all that remains of those probably 2-inch stacks that I was making. And as you can see, there's absolutely no juice left in these at all. It's just kind of like a piece of smashed apple cardboard or something like that. But like I said, I just composted in the backyard. And while I got everything set up, just to close out, I'd like to run you through the, let me turn off this music here so the Google overlords don't get mad at me. Run you through the cost of this whole setup, because it is quite cheap. I think, you know, just a rough estimate, I'm into all this for less than $300, and just the juice that I pressed alone, like this year, maybe 10 gallons of juice or something like that, I think generally, or closer to 20 gallons, I guess, with this recent press, but I think fresh pressed apple juice runs about $10 a gallon, so this thing, you can imagine, pays for itself pretty quickly. If you do 2 presses, you get 20 gallons out of it. That's $200 of fresh apple juice value. And then, of course, if you ferment it into cider, like I do, that probably more than doubles the price. I think I'm looking at this year close to $500 or more market value of cider. So just in this 1 year's pressing, this whole setup has paid for itself. And of course, I think this setup will run for years, decades, without any maintenance or replacing any parts or anything like that. So I think it's quite economical if you like apple juice or you like making your own cider. I would highly recommend using a setup like this for a small scale. Of course, if you want to scale up, all you have to do is buy the 20-ton shop press and do the same setup, but just with everything larger. Yeah, I recommend it. So hope you're having a good time. Hope you're having a good fall and winter. And good luck apple hunting, and good luck cider pressing if you're watching this and looking forward to the season. See you later. I'm going to start cleaning up here. The sun's going down. And thanks for coming along on this journey with me. This is Cider Press in Tahoe 2017.